There's something undeniable about a mystery. It keeps us coming back to your TV show week to week to look for clues, and in the modern era, it's free marketing when your fans light up social media with theories and speculation. Unfortunately, in wrestling, more than perhaps anything else, plans change and the original answer to that riddle gets cast aside. Sometimes the likes of injuries or personal lives get in the way of completing that full arc of a story that's been worked on for weeks, and sometimes, if you're the WWE, your chairman just gets bored of the original plan. Worst of all is when writers have a great idea and put it into motion, hoping they'll figure out where it leads when they get there. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 wrestling mysteries that were supposed to end differently. Number 10. R.I.P. Vince McMahon. The Monday Night Raw episode on June 11th, 2007 concluded with a rather vacant-faced Vince leaving the arena as the WWE roster lined the corridors to the exit. It was a strange, slow segment that ended in quite literally a bang as Vince's limo exploded with him inside of it. What transpired on TV was that Vince had faked his own death to see how his family would react. The original plan to hold a memorial show was torn up as, less than 2 weeks later, the tragic Chris Benoit incident occurred, and suddenly it seemed like a terrible idea. For better or worse, Vince's immediate family, wife Linda and children Shane and Stephanie, have all played roles on WWE TV. However, this storyline was going to finally introduce us to another of the McMahon clan, Roderick. Roderick McMahon, Vince's legitimate older brother, was due to make his WWE debut following the demise of the chairman to fulfill his brother's duties and become the on-screen anti-Vince. Instead of being the evil boss incarnate, Rod was going to be a soft and kind-hearted soul. Difficult to imagine how this one would have played out, not because it includes a member of the McMahon family we never saw on TV, but because the idea of Vince pretending to be dead for potentially months boggles the mind. Number 9. GTV. In the late 90s, reality TV was in, and the population at large developed an obsession with looking at the lives of others. WWE, capitalizing on this zeitgeist, began airing grainy black and white videos during episodes of Monday Night Raw that were labelled as GTV. At first, these so-called hidden camera captures were just fluff that showed WWE superstars doing stupid things, Al Snow picking his nose or Billy Gunn checking out his own butt. As it progressed, however, GTV revealed scandalous moments such as the Mean Street Posse faking injuries and Meat cheating on Terry Runnels. The question begged an answer: where was this footage coming from, and who was behind it? The segments were originally called GDTV before the D was dropped because it made it all too clear that the perpetrator was Goldust. This made a lot of sense considering the character's perverse history. When Dustin Rhodes left the company for WCW though, WWE writers had to change direction. Tom Green was an MTV comedy star, and the creative team pitched to surprise fans by introducing a celebrity rather than a wrestler as the mastermind of GTV. However, after a quick look at Green's show, Vince was not convinced. He simply didn't find Green all that funny, and to be fair, he wasn't alone. With no other ideas on the table, GTV eventually became yet another example of a WWE storyline that fizzled out into nothing. Number 8. The Black Scorpion. The idea for Black Scorpion actually started as a joke pitched by Ollie Anderson to WCW Executive Vice President Jim Herd. A man in a robe and mask would begin to haunt Sting, claiming to be a figure from his past. Herd, of course, loved it, much to Anderson's chagrin, and they got to work on crafting the Black Scorpion. After a few months of taunting Stinger and doing some weird cheap magic tricks in the crowd, the two eventually faced off at Starrcade 1990. Sting would beat the Scorpion in a World Championship match and unmask him to end the story. Underneath the hood was Ric Flair, who Sting had won his NWA title from months prior. According to Flair, WCW bookers had narrowed their available choices down to either him or Barry Windham. Since Windham had just portrayed a fake Sting at Halloween Havoc less than 2 months ago, Flair volunteered as the gimmick would hurt him less than Windham, but this decision had been made in a scramble. For whatever reason, the original man from Sting's past was set to be Al Perez, which wasn't exactly the most exciting of reveals. Perez played the character several times, but eventually left WCW before the story could come to a conclusion. Whilst the reveal wasn't all that special, Flair as the Scorpion at least had more impact than the original plan would have. Number 7. The Higher Power. Perhaps the most well-known wrestling mystery of all time is the Higher Power story. The Undertaker and his ministry had been terrorizing the McMahon family for weeks, even going so far as to kidnap Stephanie. Vince had to employ the help of his one-time rival Stone Cold to save her from unholy matrimony, but the ministry began to talk of a mysterious and terrible leader, which of course turned out to be Vince. Despite the fact it made next to no sense, it's still one of the most talked about and quoted moments in wrestling history. The reason being that writer Vince Russo's choice in Christopher Daniels was not to McMahon's taste. That is to say, he wasn't 6'7" with rippling vascularity. Daniels had been gaining a lot of momentum on the independent scene with his Fallen Angel gimmick, which Russo had identified as a great fit for the dark forces of the ministry and pitched it to his boss, who agreed without seeing the star. As Russo Russo tells it once he brought Daniels to TV, Vince looked him up and down and rejected the idea. As with many things in WWE, the script had to change last minute, and McMahon put himself in the role instead. Number 6. Eric Rowan's cage. Poor Eric Rowan, perhaps the most unloved member of the Wyatt family. After its dissolution, he wound up bouncing from one idea to the next and never really stuck with a character for all that long. In November 2019, Rowan started carrying a cage around backstage and even to the ring when he performed. The contents were a secret. All we knew was that whatever it was moved, and it would freak out other superstars who dared to take a look under the cloth that covered the cage. The big reveal was a hysterically bad mechanical spider creature, and you could practically see the embarrassment on Rowan's face. 5 months of build-up fell flat, and to top it off, Eric was released a month later. Speaking on the storyline, Rowan explains that at first, even the writers' room didn't know what was going to be in the cage, but the idea eventually became a rat. Rowan fixated on this choice, but the WWE went another way and, without telling the performer, crafted the robotic spider. The final effect looked like nothing more than a cheap Halloween prop. Number 5. Who kidnapped Samoa Joe? The unexpected end of an episode of TNA Impact in 2009 saw a despondent Samoa Joe leaving the arena after suffering a loss to Orlando Jordan. That's enough to put anyone in a bad mood, but it was about to get worse. After being almost taken out by a speeding white van, the former TNA World Heavyweight Champion would be attacked by a bunch of hooded men. These so-called ninjas grabbed Joe, threw him in the back of their vehicle, and sped off into the night, quite literally never to be seen again. Speaking in a 2014 Shoot interview, Joe said that the mystery was the work of Vince Russo's inability to write a storyline. The general concept was to have Joe go away, then return as a psychopath heel character. There wasn't much thought put into who was behind the kidnapping or why, and as the months span on, the idea of paying off the story became secondary to Impact's need for top babyfaces. With a clear hole in the roster, Joe was sent back out to get some cheers like nothing had happened. In 2020, Samoa Joe referenced the story on WWE commentary, saying that ninjas can really ruin a night. But hey, at least he got a pretty sweet 3-month vacation out of it when it happened to him. Number 4. Vince's illegitimate son. When Jonathan Coachman told Vince live on air that he had an illegitimate son, it was just a wonder of storyline coincidence that son happened to be a WWE superstar. On an episode of Monday Night Raw in September 2007, Mr. Kennedy approached the ring to try and convince the McMahon family that he was Vince's heir to the throne. However, a legal representative stood in to say that this wasn't the case and the real son would be announced next week. That real son, as we all know, was Hornswoggle, and the crowd went mild. What makes all of this strange then is that apparently Mr. Kennedy was the original plan for the illegitimate child. A big strapping young lad like that? It seems obvious that was Vince's first choice, not to mention the fact that Kennedy was pretty over. The idea was for all of this to culminate at WrestleMania with a match between the illegitimate son and the stepson Triple H. However, wellness policy suspensions put Kennedy on the shelf, and WWE booked themselves into a corner by saying that the truth would come out next week. Rather than delay, they closed the chapter and moved on. Mr. Kennedy's WWE career is a long list of unfortunate events that stopped him from getting to the top, and this was just another along the way to his eventual release. Number 3. Who's the father? There's nothing like family drama in wrestling, is there? Unlike our last entry, this one flips the script somewhat, but it's perhaps even more miserable. Mike and Maria Kanellis' run together in WWE between 2017 and 2020 is probably considered by the company as a substantial waste of time. Only a month after arriving, Maria announced she was pregnant and had to disappear from television. 2 years later, the couple announced the coming of their second child, but this time the WWE decided to turn this into a story. Playing a ruthless and downright evil character, Maria walked all over husband Mike for several weeks as she spoke down to and insulted him. As the story progressed, Maria began to insinuate that perhaps he was not the father of the baby, and it could be someone like Rusev or Ricochet. This led to Mike losing many matches, and the audience in general asking who was benefiting from any of it. The pair stopped interacting, disappeared from TV, and were released the next year. Speaking in the aftermath, Maria Kanellis revealed on Twitter that the plan was to announce that Mike was the father. This would lead the man to a babyface turn with an upbeat story about overcoming addiction. A complex tale probably a little too far above modern WWE's usual storytelling abilities. Number 2. The Gobbledygooker. In the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving 1990, the night WWE's annual Survivor Series event would take place, a large and confusing egg sat ringside. Popular rumour said that Ric Flair would make his debut by emerging from it. The newly signed Undertaker sat at home and was afraid to pick up the phone in case Vince called to tell him he was going to be playing the Eggman. In truth, when the giant egg hatched, what else could emerge but a giant turkey? Not even the talent of Hector Guerrero, who wore the costume, could make this one work. Despite Roddy Piper on commentary saying that the crowd loved the Gobbledygooker, the gimmick sunk like a stone. After a few more appearances, the character vanished from television. It was always going to be this character, but WWE envisioned a far different turn of events. Originally, Gooker was designed as a company mascot, something for the young WWE fan to be entertained by. Whilst the superhero-like characters of wrestling appealed to some, WWE wanted to target even lower demographics with this larger-than-life dancing animal gimmick. Why exactly a turkey was picked to be the company mascot for the WWE, only Vince McMahon knows. In an ironic and beautifully linguistic sense, Guka is one of the company's biggest turkeys of all time. Number 1. The Anonymous Raw GM. Between June 2010 and July 2011, Monday Night Raw was hard to watch for one key reason: heel Michael Cole. Oh, and the Anonymous Raw general manager, so 2 reasons. Deciding that impartiality was key, Vince hired a mystery man to take the position of the show's commissioner. They were represented by a MacBook on a podium that would flash the house lights and play a sound whenever they wanted to make a decree. It was slow, arduous, and utterly fruitless, as the story didn't reach a proper conclusion. Whilst WWE writers never decided on the identity of this mysterious manager, a year later at Raw 1000 it was all wrapped up quite quickly with a joke segment that showed that it had been Hornswoggle all along. However, in ensuing appearances, Swoggle has gone on record to say that at one stage the idea had a lot more weight to it rather than just being a one-off gag. The week beforehand he received a call from the company asking if he could do a New Jersey accent, the general gist being that Hornswoggle was going to transform from a leprechaun to a mob boss, in his words, with a Napoleon complex. Thankfully for Swoggle, who wasn't confident in his New Jersey accent, when he arrived for TV the concept had been scrapped and instead we had a quick reveal and then the whole thing was swept under the ring forever. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below, and let us know of any other wrestling mysteries you can think of that were meant to be booked a totally different way. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit the notification bell. I've been Cy for What Culture, and have a good week.